Seahawks fans, wherever you may be. Welcome back for another edition of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. Join your host, Phil Alvstad, and co-host, sports writer and football analyst Keith Myers, as we talk Seahawks football. Hey, Seahawks fans. Welcome back to another episode of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. I'm your host, Phil Alvstad, sitting down with co-host Keith Myers. Welcome into the show, Keith, talking NFL draft combine.
Yeah, combine is, the drills and stuff haven't started yet, but people are starting to arrive. Pete Carroll has already spoken to the media, so has John Snyder. And the most interesting thing of the entire combine has already happened in that someone has left that everyone was looking forward to talking to and seeing. And that is going to be the story from this point.
Yeah, it's a very unfortunate situation. I would imagine by the time this show hits, most people will have heard about Jalen Carter and his legal issues. It was revealed, I don't know, I think late December, Todd McShay talked about on the NFL channel possibly some character issues and so forth. I believe that this is unrelated to that, but apparently a misdemeanor arrest warrant was issued for Jalen Carter in relationship to an accident that occurred in January with another vehicle that went off the road, and two people inside that vehicle were killed. Members of the offensive line. A person was 20 years old, and then a scouting evaluator for the team, and then two other people were injured. And apparently Jalen Carter was a part of that, as far as being in another vehicle, potentially in a racing situation that got out of control. There potentially could have been some drinking. I'm not sure. It's been reported that the driver that was killed had a blood alcohol content of 0.19, which is double the limit. So lots of stuff going on. Jalen Carter released a statement basically saying, listen, I need the legal process to proceed, and I'll be exonerated once the facts come out. He's left the combine, gone back to Athens, Georgia, where the misdemeanor charges were filed, so he can kind of take care of that. And basically went through the interview process the last couple of days with multiple teams. Apparently, reporting is that this subject did not come up in his interviews, and that's from multiple sources, including Adam Schefter. And so this is crazy because he's obviously one of the most projected defensive linemen at the number 5 spot that Seattle has been interested in him, obviously, for obvious reasons. And now, based on this information, based on the character concerns that this is raising, I am saying that he's off Seattle's board at this point.
He's likely way down on Seattle's board. I don't know if he's off, but they will not be using the 5th overall pick with him. I can't imagine that they would take any risk that this is a Malik McDowell situation where you're going to draft someone who's an idiot, who's going to get off the field and have problems and never do much for you on the field. And so they're going to steer clear. My guess is if enough teams have him off the board and he drops way down, there will be a point. There will be a point where Seattle will be like, okay, he's too good to not to take a risk at this point. That may be in the 30s, it may be in the 50s. I'm sure there's at some point there will be where, and they're having those discussions right now. I don't think it'll matter because there are NFL teams that don't care. Cleveland has shown under its current leadership that they just don't give a damn, and they will take a player no matter what. And I could easily see them taking him anyway in the in round one. And so it won't matter where Seattle puts them, whether it's the 30s, the 50s, the 80s. Um, he'll be gone well before then because you've got teams that don't have morals. And that's just the way it is.
Yeah, I think I disagree with you just a little bit. I mean, I think teams do, and I think it's become the awareness of issues like this have become heightened over time, particularly if video is involved. Um, but speaking only of the Seahawks at this point, where you've potentially have alleged drinking and driving as well as racing, and then leaving the scene. So he apparently left the scene after the accident, returned to the scene an hour and a half after the accident, spoke to police, had a couple different stories in relationship to his involvement, and then came back later and had a third version, which implicated him a little deeper into the situation. And those things alone, to me, are disqualifying. But for the Seahawks, and I think the Seahawks would view it that way. I'm not exactly sure. There's after that, there's a point where Seattle gets back in the game, even if it's in the 7th round. I just think that once he's off the board, he's off the board.
And I don't think he's off the board. I think he's just way down on the board. He was probably number one on their board in terms of just on-field whatever. But because of this, now he's way down. There will be a point where the player is worth the risk. And the risk is simply that he does something stupid and you get nothing out of your draft pick, aka Malik McDowell.
My feeling on this is that if this is not legally resolved by the time the NFL draft happens, he will be off everyone's board because nobody will take that chance on a player that could be indicted on more serious charges and bring that onto their franchise. And I just think that that's just not going to happen this time. This is too serious of a situation and too close to the draft for it to, I think, work out any other way. But that's just my personal opinion.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, Cleveland's pursuit of Deshaun Watson tells me otherwise in terms of every team in the NFL. There are teams that literally they just don't care.
This did involve two people dying in this accident, and if it was shown that he was racing and directly involved, it doesn't matter if he wasn't the driver of the other car. If he was racing and drinking and driving and fled the accident and two people died, that's a big pill, Keith.
Oh, it is. But Ray Lewis didn't have any issues with his entire career after somebody died. Right? And so the NFL is about winning. And I get that there is a point. There is always a point where a guy drops far enough and people go, okay, I'm willing to try. Just it's not what I wanted, but let's do it anyway. And they're because if you throw a 5th round pick at someone and nothing works out and he ends up being, indicted and never plays it down in the NFL, you wasted a 5th round pick. But if things do, you do that with the idea that if they get cleared up, you just got maybe the best overall player in the draft as a 5th round pick.
Yeah. And that's why I think these things will, hopefully work themselves out. It's a tragedy, obviously, for multiple people involved, including Carter. And, I don't know what else to say. I mean, I don't have any more details. The details are light to begin with. And you just kind of have to let this thing play out a little bit.
Yep.
He's not going to participate in the combine. He's obviously given some interviews and did not disclose issues that were pending for him. Whether he told his agent was involved, which I believe is Lee Steinberg. that could be problematic as well. And so it's a big thing, and
Yeah.
it'll be something we'll be talking about.
I don't
It
want to say
seems
that
like
I
for a
am not
while.
advocating uh that teams should draft him. I wouldn't. I would not draft him. And I think the Seahawks hopefully learned their lesson with Malik McDowell. Um the but I'm just saying I just think that realistically there are teams, and Cleveland's the easiest one to point out right now, but um, Cincinnati has been one to do the same things. Houston's been one to do the same thing. And there are it's someone will take the risk, and it's unfortunate in some ways.
Yeah. All right. So let's continue our conversation here, and let's move on. Um, it's Combine Week. Obviously, we're talking about that. The on TV portion of the Combine begins Thursday. It starts, I believe, at 11 a.m. Pacific time, 2 p.m. Eastern time. You can watch that on the NFL channel. I think it's on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. But prior to that, teams had media availability. Pete Carroll and John Schneider got in front of the camera. They, talked about this, that, and the other without really talking about anything. They did. Pete Carroll did mention that they are involved in looking at quarterbacks.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was one of the only things he really admitted to. And so we'll see. There could be a potential where 4 quarterbacks go in the first 4 picks, depending on trades that are being bantered around right now with Chicago and moving out of the number 1 pick overall and so
Depends
forth.
on
So we'll
depends
see.
on how far down they drop.
And if
Yeah,
Arizona stays at 3, if Arizona moves off that pick as well, there could be 4 quarterbacks taken, and Seattle
yep.
would have an
They
opportunity to
have their
still have
best
Anderson possibly.
have the best non-quarterback player in the entire draft.
It's possible,
Not unlikely, but yes. Um,
unlikely but possible.
yeah, Seattle's going to be connected to every top quarterback in this draft. All 4 of the guys in rounds 2 and 3, because they're going to go look at everybody. They're gonna try and figure this out. They know they're in a position to get a quarterback. Pete Carroll and John Snyder both said that you don't get to pick in the top 5 very often, and when you do, it's an opportunity. And as a team without a franchise quarterback, I mean, they've got a nice piece in Geno Smith, assuming he resigns, but he's not a franchise defining quarterback. Um, you're only in position to draft one occasionally,
Yes.
unless you're Houston, and then you're in position to draft one every year.
As John Schneider said, they don't grow on trees.
Exactly. And so they're going to be connected to every one of them, and they're going to be looking at every single one of them, and they're going to fall in love with someone. And if they're available at 5, they'll
They
take them.
probably already have.
I'm sure. But the chances are, if they fall in love with someone, they won't be there at 5. They'll be taking either 1 or 2, and we'll see. Are they in love with more than one? That's
NBC
the key.
people at NBC have already speculated that Seattle could be in play for the number 1 pick
Yep.
because of the statement that Pete Carroll made about quarterbacks already. So this thing's going to get crazy, the rumors and whatnot.
Yeah, I saw that report, and I'm like, I went through and read Pete Carroll's comments, and nothing in there said, "Oh, we're going to be aggressive, we're going to move up," or
Right.
we're going to go get a guy. It was simply, you're just not in this position very often, so you have to think about it. That
Which
to me
is
does
what they've
not say
said to
trade up.
almost every position since the beginning of time. I mean, really,
Yeah,
it's not that big of a deal.
that does not say we're going to trade up to number 1 overall and or anything like that.
So before the combine gets kicked off on TV, the teams, and we kind of mentioned this with relationship to Jalen Carter earlier, the teams have an opportunity to interview all the prospects. They've got 30 individual interviews, and then they do a broader interview where there's tables set up in a ballroom at one of the local hotels, and the players just basically swing by every booth and talk to individual uh, coaches and scouts and so forth. Greg Bell reported that. I wanted to say this too. that multiple league sources told him at the combine that the team is keenly interested in bringing Bobby Wagner back.
Why
So,
wouldn't they be?
well, it's going to be expensive,
Is it?
probably. I would say at least 12 million, and that would probably be the insult, to Bobby Wagner. Yeah, but you and I had talked prior to last year when we were, Bobby was negotiating out there and and what Seattle may be willing to pay him. And I think we both settled on 10 to $12 million. And that seems about right. Although I will say this, Bobby Wagner came out and had a stellar season last year. But he had the protection up front of Aaron Donald in front of him too. So that makes a big difference.
Yeah, Wagner had a really good year last year, but it was a down year for him. And he was starting to show his age before his contract in Seattle ended. He was not as good last year, even though he was still freaking amazing because he's Bobby Wagner. And now he's going to be another year older. If he was 10 to 12 million last year, what is he now? 9 to 11?
Well,
Um,
to us, but what is the importance to the team? Let's try to be realistic about this and what they would want to do. They've got a situation where their middle linebacker may not be able to start the season, and if he
mhm.
does start the season, he's going to be, somewhat weakened and so forth. It'd be nice to pair him with Bobby Wagner. That would certainly be an upgrade, I think. And then the veteran leadership on a kind of a younger team that's going to bring out a lot of young talent out of this draft. So for me, maybe, if I'm trying to be realistic, um, I would do like a $28 million deal over 2 years with it somewhat front loaded and have an escape clause next year, because I think he is
14.
worth it to have a player like that on the team. Is
So
Seattle in
then
a
you're
position to be able to afford it is
I
the
was going to say,
question.
so they're not re-signing Geno Smith in this situation.
Listen, the team's got a lot of reworked contracts to do, and you know it.
I know, but they
So I
haven't
mean,
they haven't gotten
they
around to
could do
cut.
Bobby and they could do Gino, but then there'd be nothing else,
Yeah,
pretty much. And
or they
we'd be cutting Shelby Harris, we'd be cutting Jamal Adams, that sort of a thing.
yep.
You still got to replace those players.
Mm-hmm. That's why I don't. I Of course they want him back. He's one of the best linebackers in the history of the NFL, and he spent all of his entire career except for last year in Seattle. He's been the face of the defense in Seattle for quite a while. I mean, he shared it with Richard Sherman for a bit, but he survived much longer than Sherman did here. And of course, they'd want him back. He's a phenomenal player and a phenomenal human being off the field. I just don't see it fitting financially unless he's willing to take a lot less than you think.
Yeah, which I don't think he would be. I mean, coming off an all pro year, he was statistically and Pro Football Focus had him ranked as the number one linebacker in the league at his age, and he's still going at it now. He may have lost a step, but he brings everything else on the table.
And
The
his tackle
other
numbers were down, and that was with all the support he had up front. Um,
the other thing that I want to talk about is Austin Blythe. He officially retired. It kind of came out of nowhere. It wasn't like we were planning on Austin Blythe coming back, although the team may have upgraded potentially in free agency at right guard, spent some money there, didn't have a lot of money yet to throw at center position, but wanted to get that handled before the draft, throw a $3.5 million contract to Austin Blythe to come back. That possibly could have gotten that done. He elects to retire. And so Seattle is pressed into finding a new center in 2023. And I'm not sad about it.
yeah, I'm not either. I mean, he was going to be a draft hedge, and that's it. Now they're going to have that $3.5 million to throw at a different center, one that will be better because Austin Blythe wasn't good. Um,
And
and
possibly more. That possibly they that's where they spend their money in free agency, and they get somebody that's halfway decent. I don't know.
yeah, I mean, like you're right, it's possible, but ultimately there's going to be a draft pick. There's going to be a veteran signed for a small contract, and the two of them are going to fight it out for to see who gets to play. There's another option though. I know that other option is that you just play without a center and Geno snaps the ball to himself. No, the other option is that when they re-signed Phil Haynes, that it could be a situation where either he or Lewis, they're planning on moving inside to center and then replacing a guard. And
If that's
so,
truly the plan, they're drafting a center in the first round because they're not going into the season with that as being their primary plan. But if they were planning on truly getting a center in their first 4 picks that was going to come in and start right away, I think maybe they would
yeah. I mean,
they
so
would do that.
you have that as your draft hedge where you know that one of those two guys is going to play guard and one of those two guys is going to play center. Um, uh, and then you see how the draft unfolds. But the
And
plan is to get a center.
if the draft doesn't unfold either, so you've got that plan, then the draft goes, doesn't fall the way that you want it. You don't come out of the draft with a center, or at least a center that's able to start right away. There's still after the draft, you've got undrafted rookie free agents, and then you've got, the veteran signings that still haven't signed
Mm-hmm.
from free agency. So I
And
mean,
there's always another round of cuts after the June 1st
exactly,
point too.
exactly. Okay, so let's talk combine stuff. So all the interview stuff is going on right now. Teams are reaping huge amounts of information. That's why they're here. That's Greg Belk went on a couple 3-minute little video he does on a daily basis, and he kind of reiterated that they really go there for these interviews. This is the most important key aspect of the combine for the Seahawks and the Seahawks front office. Everything else is kind of confirming their priors, what they've seen on tape, how they've already interviewed players at the Senior Bowl and other bowl games. And then they come in and they basically confirm or not confirm what they've previously seen. So they'll either add a grade to a player for meeting expectations or exceeding, or they'll knock a player because he came up measurements a little short. 40 or agility times weren't as good as they thought they were. Talk to me a little bit about what you're excited for at the combine in general.
I'm excited for there's some players that I'm just like super excited to see do stuff. The first one is the guy out of Michigan, Mozzie Smith, the defensive tackle.
Yeah.
He is. I didn't realize this when we were doing our defensive tackle show until you told me that he was number one on the
Bruce
Bruce
Feldman's
Feldman freak
list.
list.
Uh-huh.
And I've been doing some reading about stuff since then, and like apparently on there was one of the machines that they didn't go up high enough as far as the weight. They had to go and buy an extension for the machine to get it up to 800 pounds just to challenge him.
That's funny.
Um, and so I'm like, okay, show me this. This is going to be fun. And so
That is that like a leg press?
yeah.
Yeah. And and when sometimes when they can't get the weight, they'll have coaches and stuff stand on the machine. Coaches will weigh in, then they'll stand on the machine to add the weight. It's
Mm-hmm.
crazy. I've seen those videos before. Yeah, another I was looking forward to seeing Jalen Carter, although it was reported he wasn't going to be able to work out. Tyree Wilson is another player that I wanted to see, is not going to work out. He's going to work out at his pro day, which is I think March 15th. He's a player to watch, I think, for Seattle now that Jalen Carter is potentially out of the mix. Tyree Wilson would be a player that I think Seattle would love at the fifth pick overall as a long 275-pound defensive end slash outside linebacker slash 3 tech, kind of a player that can do it all. Super long, like 86
Yeah.
inch wingspan long.
That's a little higher than I was expecting him to go. Not that I mean he's a good player, and he's going to be, top half of the first round guy, but 5 just all
I
that was
know.
low.
And you know what? Seattle could get themselves in a situation because of this Jalen Carter thing. It's taken one player off the board that was going to be in play in the top 5. Now you're starting to reach a little bit in a couple of these spots. It's like, I just don't know exactly what Seattle's going to do at this point. I haven't thought of the equation without Jalen Carter in the mix yet.
Yeah. Another guy that I'm interested in seeing is Brian Breesy, the other defensive tackle, because again, this is a guy that's just a freakish athlete, and if he comes out and just blows away the combine, well, he could actually move up and be, at least in the draft, for the draft media, what Jalen Carter was, and that's the number one defensive player, or maybe the number two defensive player, because Will Anderson will be number one. But he has potential to basically fill that void with a super freaky combine.
Yeah. Another player that's expected to do the same sort of thing is Lucas Van Ness. Is coming
Mm-hmm.
in, just an extremely well built human being that is expected to just overpower the combine there. I kind of wanted to go through this in position groups so we're kind of not just jumping all over the place. And I wanted to start with the quarterbacks because we're keenly interested in that. I think the Seahawks are too. Not sure exactly which direction they're going to go. There's been no indication yet if they favor a certain quarterback, if they've even ruled out quarterbacks and they're just kind of playing it like they're very interested. We just don't know. But there are a couple of quarterbacks that I would be really interested in seeing at the combine, and two of them, Anthony Richardson and Will Levis, both have huge arms. I want to see how they move around. I want to see how they handle themselves amongst all the other quarterbacks at the combine. I don't really care how fast they are, although I know Anthony Richardson's going to run in the 4.4s sometime. It's going to be spectacular. I think he's going to have a buzz about him after this thing. But when you go look at the tape, it's still the tape. You have to kind of,
He's still a 53%
right.
completion percentage guy.
He's a 5th-round quarterback with 1st-round potential.
He's a fifth round quarterback, and if he wasn't a quarterback, if he was a defensive end, he'd be a first-round pick as a defensive end. He's
funny.
that good of an athlete.
Yeah,
It's crazy. But there's so much potential there, and I get that. He just scares me to death because he misses so many targets. There's just no accuracy.
And Will Levis is the same. He's super athletic. He's got all that upside, that huge arm. He scares me for the same reason. He's erratic and he misses throws. And so I'm skeptical on Will Levis for the same sort of reasons. I might elect to take the upside on Richardson only because we've got 2 first-round picks. I think when you've got 2 first-round picks, it makes it slightly easier to use one of those picks on potential as opposed to a sure player.
Mm-hmm.
How about running backs, Keith?
Oh God, there's so many.
That's true. There is a lot.
You're like, oh, I want to go through this position by position. I'm like, oh no. The one I want to see the most run is going to be Rashawn Johnson. I think he's going to come in, and even though he's the second running back at Texas, he's going to come in and just blow away those workouts, and people are going to be like, he's would have been the top running back at most schools, and he was set number 2 at Texas only because the other guy was so good. And you're going to see this guy that still has a lot of tread left on his tires because he didn't get run into the ground in college. Just very limited usage is going to go higher than the draft media thinks.
I think he's one of those guys that I think Seattle ends up falling in love with because he's 220 pounds plus. Texas coaches had him over 22 miles per hour on the GPS at that size and that power. That's just really impressive. And Seattle is going to be really attracted to that. So it wouldn't surprise me. It wouldn't shock me if Seattle used their 58th pick overall to jump up and grab a guy like that to really solve the running back problem for them for a number of years to come. So that could be an interesting name to watch for sure.
He's a guy, the whole him not being the starter and all of that. He's kind of like Kristen Michael, but without the head case.
Yes.
He is that athletic.
Yes.
And hopefully he can turn it into NFL production.
Yeah, it's interesting because guys don't see Rashawn Johnson as being a 2nd-round prospect in this draft. All the mocks are out there, big boards have him in the 3rd, 4th, 5th round. He's not that. He's gonna go sooner than that, because the physical attributes that he brings to the table, plus the low mileage on the tread and the way that he runs, teams are going to
Mhm.
covet that. It's just the way it is. I would say Devon Etienne, Texas A&M, and Keaton Mitchell out of East Carolina are going to light up the combine with their speed. Both are projected to run into the 4.3s. Keaton Mitchell's rumored to run in the 4.2s. So we'll see how that goes for a running back. That would be crazy.
That is crazy. I'd also like to see, Kendre Miller out of TCU,
I would too.
because I think he's going to do really well here at the combine and really look good, and people are going to take notice that he's maybe better than the draft media is suggesting at this point.
And if you go watch him run, Keith, if you just go watch him, he
Mhm.
runs really well. I really
Yeah, he
like
does.
his cutback ability. He reminds me of Charbonnet a little bit. Like when you go watch
Mhm.
Charbonnet or even Bijan Robinson. So when you watch Bijan run, he's just so amazing. His vision is just perfect. His execution on his vision, like his body and his speed will allow him to do what he sees in his brain. A lot of running backs, they see something, but they just can't act on it. Bijan Robinson is the guy that can just immediately go. Um, a guy that you just mentioned, he's got that ability, I think. Not the same, but similar.
Mhm. So let's move on to wide receiver, and this one, like, I'm interested in this. There's a couple of guys that I want to see run because I'm hoping that they'll run faster than projected. Guys like Cedric Tillman out of Tennessee, um,
Hmm.
but mostly the parts of the combine that I'm going to be interested in for the wide receiver is a lot of the measurements that happen in the weigh-in the day before they go out and start doing the drills, because we've got a lot of shorter guys, shorter arms, slot receiver only kind of guys, and I'm hoping that a couple of them come in and surprise with, hey, guess what? These guys' arms are longer than people had suspected, and give them, a little more length and a little more potential to play on the outside. Because outside of Quentin Johnson, it's a while on the big board
Hmm.
before you get a
Hmm.
guy that's truly an outside receiver
Yes.
and not a slot guy.
Yeah, like Tyler Scott, you'd mentioned him the
Hmm.
other day, or Cedric Tillman, obviously. Um, Dontavian Wicks, Trey Palmer, Michael Wilson. Michael Wilson is an interesting
Oh,
receiver at this
I want to
combine.
see him. I want to see him come out and just do awesome, because he's a guy that's kind of came out of nowhere at the at the Senior Bowl, and people were like, "Wait, who?" Stanford had athletes this year. Like, they people seem confused by it, but he looked really really good at the Senior Bowl, and if he comes out and just nails the combine, he's gonna fly up draft boards.
Tight ends are interesting for me as well. Darnell Washington, I want to see that guy like move and catch balls and just he's like 6'7", 265 pounds. I mean, holy cow. Apparently he
Hmm.
runs like a 4.65 too. So
That's quick.
which is amazing for that. Luke Musgrave is going to run a little faster in the 4.5s, I guess. That'll be interesting. Dalton Kincaid is in the 4.6s probably. Uh, I don't know. I mean, he's a possession receiver at the college level. I just don't know the production's going to be there because I don't think he can get separation
Hmm.
at the NFL. Michael Mayer, is going to be
Yeah.
slower. He's going to run like a 4.75, 4.8, similar to Will
Uh-huh.
Disley, but he's just so much more of a well-rounded, put together prospect than Disley was coming out of college.
He is. Disley was a fourth round pick. Mayer is, like, people are thinking as, back into the first round, and but their athleticism is going to be similar overall. Mayer's just more polished, but it didn't take a lot for Disley to get into the
It's
NFL
true. It's true.
and do good things. And so, um, is there really the difference between Disley and Mayer that puts Mayer as a first round pick, even though Disley was a fourth rounder? Maybe people, it's
Well, it's
the
just all
lesson.
that production. you know.
Maybe here the lesson is that teams undervalue Disley, but I worry that it's teams overvaluing Mayer because the athleticism is not there. He's not going to get a lot of
He's going
separation.
to be a real steady player for you for a long time, but
Mm-hmm.
he's not some of the premier guys that are in the league right now.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so how about the offensive line?
Oh man. So with the offensive line, there's some again
And they
Peter
don't work until
Skoronsky.
Sunday this week, by the way.
Yeah, I know. Peter Skoronsky's a guy before the drills even start. I want to see him. I hope that his arms are longer than what is in the draft media right now, because if it's not, especially if it ends up shorter, he's going to end up as a guard and he's going to
Mm-hmm.
drop from being a mid first round pick into maybe it being a second round pick. It's going to cost him millions. And that would be unfortunate. The other guy that I'm really excited to see is DeJuan Jones out of Ohio State, because this guy's massive, like 375 pounds, massive, but moves incredibly well, and he's going to be fun. His size, his length.
Depending on how he does his agility drills and matches up with other linemen, like where you can just see him side by side, he may
Mm-hmm.
end up rising just slightly at the combine here, just based on
Oh
his
yeah,
workouts. Not a lot. I mean, there's evaluations that have already been done and baked, but when you
well,
compare
especially
him
if
to Anton
Skoronsky.
Harrison or Broderick Jones
Mm-hmm.
and Paris Johnson, and he's the guy that's just standing out in every drill, you tend to level those players out a little bit.
Well, yeah, especially if Skoronsky, ends up not long enough according to the measurables, he'll drop, and that puts um, Jones, despite his massive size, as the fourth best tackle in this draft class. And if he goes and shows agility and he shows quick feet and good movement at that massive size, teams are gonna love him. They're just absolutely gonna love him.
How about at the guard and center position on the inside, Keith?
Well, okay, so it's a little weirder in this because um, there's a lot of guys in the middle rounds that I'm very interested in, just because I think that there can be some scouting here, at least for me, that will help as far getting to know their athleticism a little better than I currently do. Luke Weipler out of Ohio State's one of those guys. Jared Peterson out of Notre Dame is one of those guys. But honestly, if I'm being honest about the guys that I'm excited to see, it's Osiris Torrance out of Florida, the first round guard, who is a lot of people are connecting to Seattle, and I think you and I both mocked him to Seattle. And then John Michael Schmidt out of Minnesota. He's a center. Again, another guy connected to Seattle quite often.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would like to see Cody Mock as well work out. He played tackle at North Dakota State. He's going to move inside, I think, in the NFL. We all talked about that. He's got 32 and 3/8 inch arms, and a little undersized. And so he's a center prospect. I think Seattle would take a look at if he's sitting there in, say, the third round as a potential starter, but he might take a little bit of time. He's never really played that position. Joe Tipman again. Yeah, there's a number of prospects. I want to see Jarrett Patterson. I want to see how undersized he really looks. I think he's close to 300 pounds, and yeah, he's an older prospect. He was fifth year senior this year. And when I take a look at the kid from Michigan, Nick Broker, I'd like to look at. And that's about it.
Yeah.
How about on the defensive side, Keith? This is where all the action is.
It is because the defensive players typically are the ones that jump out of the gym and show that they're just absolutely crazy athleticism. We already mentioned what's going on with Jalen Carter. He's not there anymore. Brian Breesy is a guy that I think will move up with and fill that spot. But the guys that I'm kind of more interested in really learning more about how they move athletically are down the board a little bit. Jocelyn Roy out of LSU, Mike Morris, he's Mozzie Smith's teammate out of Michigan. Colby Wooden out of Auburn. These are guys that I think have a chance to really help themselves by coming in and doing good things here.
Yeah, before the show, you talked to me about Mozzie Smith as being a guy that you're really interested in looking at, and I am too. I want to be able to see how that guy moves. I want to see him, and I want to see Kalasia Kansi, the
That's another
undersized
one.
defensive lineman at 6 foot, 280, 85 pounds. I want to see if he's put on a little bit of weight without losing any of the agility. I understand he's just like a tenacious guy, and I want to kind of see that a little bit in action.
Hopefully he's
Um,
grown an inch and his arms are like 3 inches longer. Because if that's the case, put him up in the first round.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
And then on the edge and at linebacker, Miles Murphy is reportedly one of the most athletic guys here at the combine
hmm
and the fastest guy. He probably potentially could run into the 4.5 range where Trayvon Walker ran previously at 275 pounds. That would be something to see. Keon White, former tight end, a guy that moves like one at
Yeah.
280 pounds. I want to see that. And that's a potential fit for Seattle, kind of
Yeah,
in that.
that's a guy that and I think you and I both mocked him to Seattle in our last
Mm-hmm,
mock draft.
mm-hmm.
Um,
Kind of a Shelby Harris kind of prototype.
yeah, really, but he's raw and was super effective anyway because of how athletic and talented he is. It'll be fun to see him. Zach Harrison is another guy that comes to mind. It's weird that I seem to
Yeah.
be picking a lot of like big school guys, um, but he's a guy that I think he has a chance to to separate himself a little bit because there's like a whole huge group of guys between 50 and 70 in
Yeah.
this, and Zach Harrison's a guy that I think is going to move up into that.
Two of the guys. Yeah, I like Zach Harrison as well. He might be slightly shorter, not short stature wise, but length
hmm
than what NFL guys like. Two guys that I really like because they are long, and Seattle, I think, would have them on their radar is Will McDonald, the fourth out of Iowa State, the edge rusher, and Andre Carter out of
Army.
Army.
hmm
Andre Carter didn't do well at the Senior Bowl, and I've never really figured out exactly what was going on there. But Will McDonald, I think that Seattle is keenly interested in.
I think the Seahawks should draft Will McDonald entirely because he's Will McDonald the fourth, and you need more numbers in your on your roster at all times.
His
Um,
great great grandfather is literally Old McDonald.
um, yeah. And then there's a bunch of guys. On these edge positions. Brenton Cox Jr. out of Florida, Nick Hampton out of Appalachian State are a couple other guys I want to
Yeah,
see run. I want to see that they're as athletic as people think, and if they are they really going to last? Outside the top 150? Because I don't think they will if they truly are as athletic as people are saying.
yeah, interesting. How about middle linebacker? Everyone seems to want to know about middle linebackers, and nobody really seems to have any answers because it seems like in the 3-4 scheme, finding middle linebackers seems to be a little bit more of a challenge for Seahawk fans. Is there any that we can identify that we're looking at here?
There's a lot that we can identify. It's for me. It's going to start with Noah Sewell out of Oregon. Um, he's a guy that I think he's gonna test really well and have a shot at being a late round 2 pick. And if he gets picked by Seattle, he goes into being like an instant starter. Um, Same goes for Jack Campbell out of Iowa, right in that same range. I'm really interested in Nick Herberg out of Wisconsin and Diane Henley out of Washington State for different
Mm-hmm.
reasons. I want to know that Herberg is fast enough to play sideline to sideline in the NFL. And I want to know if Henley is big enough to be a middle linebacker in the 3-4, or
I
whether he needs to
understand that
be a weak side guy.
I understand that he's trying to put on some weight, so we're going to
hmm
see. Hopefully,
Yep.
Jack Campbell. Everyone's talking about Jack Campbell. Looks
hmm
great on film. Might be slightly slow, and so we just kind of want to to see that. I agree on Sewell. I think he battled through injury, had a down year compared to the 2021 year that he had, and so everyone's kind of forgotten about him or kind of downplaying him a little bit. And I think that he rises up the boards when he reminds people. Drew Sanders is another player that I think would be on Seattle's radar, given the state of our current middle linebacker spot. It wouldn't, we drafted Brooks a couple years ago. They could go in that same direction in that same area of the draft with a guy like Drew Sanders as well. So those are players that I'm looking at.
Yeah, Sanders would be an interesting pick. I think Seahawk Twitter would melt down at another linebacker
Probably,
and
unless he was available.
in there.
It's at in the mid-second round, and they dropped back a few times, picked up additional draft capital or whatever. I think that he might be a guy.
Yeah, and I don't think the Seahawks are interested in Trenton Simpson because I think he's going to be
He's a
first round
tweener.
pick.
He's a tweener.
And he
He's a
doesn't
safety
really,
and a playing linebacker, basically.
yeah, he doesn't really fit a 3-4 because in a 3-4, your middle linebackers need to be able to get off blocks. And
And
he's
isn't
a
he like
guy,
225 or something like that? He's super fast.
yeah, but he's a guy that needs a 4-3 so that way he can have more defensive linemen in front of him eating blocks and keep him clean. And if you have that, I think he can be a phenomenal player. But
Would you play him at will in a 4-3?
in a 4-3, I'd put him at will.
Yeah, interesting. How about the guy that you mocked to your on your mock, Henry Tuo?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't include him in my list of ones I was looking at because I just expect him to be good, and I think he's gonna be.
Yeah, he's going to test well.
I
He's
feel like
undersized.
he is, but I feel like I already have a good understanding of him, so I'm not like, ooh, I need to see this guy. He's a little undersized, but not bad. He's not like a 220-pound linebacker. He's like a 235-pound linebacker, and he'll be fine.
So people seem to think, and by people I mean Keith, seem to think that we might not draft a corner in this draft in the first 3 or 4 rounds. Is that true, or is it possible that Seattle might be looking?
Never count the Seahawks out to do anything. That's if there's any lesson with John Snyder, it's that. I don't think they're gonna draft a cornerback early because they don't draft cornerbacks early.
So we
The
can rule
earliest
Gonzalez out.
I think you can. The earliest that they've drafted a corner in the Pete Carroll, John Snyder era is a 3rd-round pick.
They did draft a safety at 15 overall.
We're not talking about safeties. We're talking about corner.
I know. I'm just thinking of positional value.
Yep.
If they went and drafted a safety at 15 at one point because he was the tremendous difference maker, might they draft a corner at 5 or dropping back off of 5? I know they haven't done it yet, but could they?
I don't think that could they? Of course they could, but I don't think they will, and I don't think it's even part of the plan because they're 4 deep at cornerback right now with guys on the roster. They're not desperate for one. They don't need a starter in this draft. And honestly, Pete Carroll believes in his ability to coach up mid-round guys and have them be good enough to be starters. And that's more of what I see.
A guy that seems like fringy, first, second round. Sometimes I see him as late as, late second round, 3rd round is Keely Ringo out of Georgia. But here's a guy that's got, ideal size, but apparently he's got 4.2 something speed as well. And apparently the word on the street is this guy's going to just completely knock it out of the park at the combine. And if he does, I would like to see that.
Yeah, that would be fun.
People say that he has deficiencies in his game as far as tracking the ball and allowing people to get by him a little bit because he's focused on stopping the run or whatever. I don't know, but we'll see. Yeah, I don't know what Georgia's scheme is asking him to do.
I just think that knowing Pete Carroll and having watched this this team under him and Schneider, that it's just too early. They don't need a guy. They'll wait, and then they'll get someone that no one's really thinking of, and they'll sit on the bench or play special teams for a year, and then suddenly be good. A guy like
Sure.
Anthony Johnson out of Virginia comes to
Yeah.
mind.
Yeah.
Cameron Mitchell out of Northwestern comes to mind. I mean, these are the types of guys that I could see Seattle taking. I just hopefully they go out and nail their combine and get noticed.
Yeah. A guy to watch is Riley Moss out of Iowa. Kind of,
Yes.
but he's going to be a sleeper. But he was the second fastest corner at the Senior Bowl, so it's just one of those things to watch.
Mm-hmm.
Safeties, I like Sidney Brown as far as being the athletic winner of the combine at the safety position. But there's a lot of other players I really like at safety.
I'm
Brian,
really I'm really interested in Antonio Johnson out of Texas A&M. I think he is going to come in and test well, and people are going to start looking at him. And he's a guy that Seattle may look at and go, okay, maybe we can save some money on uh, Diggs, which is
yeah,
who's $18 million of the cap. If we can go draft a rookie that can replace him.
yeah, free safety might be a spot that is being looked at by Seattle this year, and not only for this year, just to have a guy that can come in and play two high safety looks along with Diggs, but somebody to replace Diggs eventually, because Diggs has a really outsized contract, and it could be this year, it could be next year. The other one is the strong safety. We've got Ryan Neal. We
Mm-hmm.
know Jamal Adams. Everyone, the mixed messages about Jamal Adams just never cease to amaze me. It's crazy. Um, Greg Bell was talking about like he was already on the roster in 2023, and we've talked, and other people have talked about him being a cap casualty for obvious reasons. And so, they may take a look in the later rounds, like a Ronnie Hickman or um, an JL Skinner out of Boise State is a big heavy hitter guy. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Cam Chancellor. If they can pick him up in the third or fourth round, that would be amazing. I think he's going to go earlier than that, but
Mm-hmm.
you never know.
Yeah.
So that's it. We ran through it, and it took us forever. I don't know how we took so long in this show, but we did.
Well, we spent like 20 minutes before we even got to a player
That's
in the
true.
combine. So,
That's true.
um, yeah. There's the combine's fun.
Yeah, it is fun.
I always tell people not to overestimate what you see and what you read about the combine, because um, if a guy is moving way up draft boards because of the combine, that just means that the draft media may be just catching up and like, oh, this guy's more athletic than anyone thought. But the NFL teams already know. What's the most important thing that happens here are the medical checkups that happen and the interviews. The
Yep.
drills and that kind
Right.
of stuff are more there. It's confirmation bias.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. So I'm taking half a day off Thursday. I'm taking the half a day off Friday. I've already procured the TV rights for Saturday and Sunday. And my significant other's first question was, "Do you have enough food to last you 4 days of combine viewing?" And that's when I knew that she was the
yep.
one.
That's awesome. No,
Yeah,
I will be at work on Thursday and Friday, and so I will miss all of the combine for that. And then we'll see what happens this weekend. I'm hoping to get a chance to see some of it, and I will be reading about it and watching as much as I can online.
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
excited
And
for it.
we'll record probably Sunday afternoon. I want to get through the quarterbacks and the offensive linemen, which are now pushed to Sunday
Mm-hmm.
this year. And so if we can do that, that would be great. And we can get back next week and talk about it, and then get back on track as far as going through all the prospects again. So cool. Thanks,
Cool.
Keith.
Yeah,
Appreciate
this
your
was
time.
fun.
It's fun. good conversation. You can follow Keith at Myers NFL on Twitter. You can find me at NW Seahawk. You can find the show on your favorite podcast platforms and our YouTube channel, Seahawks Playbook. And when you do, hit that subscribe button. So until next time, go Hawks.
Seahawks Playbook podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Bill is at NW Seahawk. Keith is at Myers NFL. And the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.